Welcome to Salem Witch Trials Daily. I'm Josh Hutchinson.
In 17th century Massachusetts, witchcraft was a capital offense. A single conviction could, and often did, lead to the gallows.
Today we're focused on staying alive during the witch panic. When the neighbor you've known for 20 years points a finger at you, what do? We've identified 8 specific survival strategies used by the accused to avoid the hangman.
Some of these methods were calculated, some were desperate, and some weren't very sound. And we're looking at it from this modern perspective looking back. But in a season of fear, people used whatever resources they had to survive.
The first and perhaps most controversial strategy was confession. It seems counterintuitive, admitting to a capital crime to save your life, but the numbers tell a startling story.
Out of 55 people who confessed to witchcraft in 1692, only one was hanged, and that individual was only executed after they recanted or took back their confession.
But it's very important to understand that confessing didn't actually mean you were innocent in the eyes of the law. It was a stalling tactic. This delayed the inevitable, really. Confessors were simply moved to the back of the trial queue.
8 others who confessed were condemned to die, but they were saved by a last-minute reprieve from Governor Sir William Phips. If the court of Oyer and Terminer had kept sitting after September 1692, those confessors would have had their execution day next.
If you couldn't bring yourself to lie and confess to a crime that didn't exist, let alone one that you didn't commit, there were biological and spiritual routes to delay execution.
One strategy was pleading the belly. In 1692, Elizabeth Proctor and Abigail Faulkner Sr. both eluded the noose because they were pregnant. The law would not execute an innocent unborn child for the alleged crimes of the mother.
But that safety was temporary. Once Elizabeth Proctor gave birth, she was immediately condemned again. She only survived because Governor Phips issued that final clearing that we talked about of those set for execution.
Then there's a spiritual route, which we see in the unique case of Dorcas Hoar.
Yeah, 4 ministers actually petitioned the governor on Dorcas Hoar's behalf. They asked that she could be given 1 month to get right with God before her execution.
They filed that petition just one day before the final round of executions. During that 1 month grace period is when the governor shut down the court, and Dorcas was eventually reprieved in January 1693.
Now we get into some more aggressive tactics. Strategy 4, if you think you're going to be accused, you can start accusing others, even if they're in your own family.
We see this with Alan Toothaker. His father had already died in jail, and his mother, sister, and cousins were all behind bars. In what looks like a desperate act of self-preservation, Alan accused his own aunt, Martha Carrier, of witchcraft.
I do want to note that we can't say for sure what his motivations were because that's not in any of the surviving records. But it does have that appearance that it might have been an act of self-preservation, and it worked either way. He was not accused of witchcraft himself. And then there's a 5th strategy, becoming afflicted yourself. Because if you're the one having the fits in court, how can you be the witch?
John Indian is a prime example. After his wife Tittabel was arrested, John, who had helped bake a witch cake, suddenly became the afflicted.
And don't forget Mary Warren. She flipped sides twice. First, she was afflicted, then she claimed the other girls were lying. When the other afflicted turned on her and accused her of witchcraft, she immediately went back to being an afflicted accuser, and the charges against her were never pursued.
For those who wanted to maintain their integrity, the community was the 6th and 7th line of defense, petitions, and character witnesses.
People like Rebecca Nurse and John Proctor relied heavily on both petitions and character witnesses, and Mary Esty wrote an incredibly eloquent plea to the court.
They weren't just personal notes, they were often signed by dozens of neighbors, ministers, or civic leaders. They would testify to someone's character or even testify against the credibility of the accusers, which is what Mary did in her petition.
And unfortunately, in the heat of 1692, even the best character witnesses weren't enough to stop the convictions.
And so now we're going to talk about the final and perhaps most effective strategy: running away.
Since everyone who was brought to trial in 1692 was convicted, 27 out of 27 people who faced the court of Oyer and Terminer, the best way to survive was simply not to be there.
Author Marilyn K. Roach identified 21 individuals who chose that path. Some fled before the warrants were even issued. Others escaped from jail or evaded arrest entirely.
You might lose your property to confiscation, but you kept your life. The only strategy was to head for a place like New York where you could find safe haven, because the governor there did protect some accused who escaped from Salem. And get there and don't look back.
In the end, virtually it was luck that played the biggest role. If you were held over for trial until September 22nd, 1692, your chances of survival skyrocketed because it wasn't justice that saved anybody.
It was just things came to an end. During the witch trials, we know there wasn't a guaranteed method to survive. At least 25 people did die, 19 were hanged, 1 was pressed to death, and 5 succumbed to the conditions of the jails. Even those acquitted, like Lydia Dustin, sometimes died in a cell because they couldn't pay their jail fees.